Oh, we're doing it today. Let's do this. Yes. Almost there. Look at that. We're going for it. Oh, no, I messed it up already. There we go. Boom. Okay, almost there. What do we got? I gotta do this fast. Boom. Look, we're almost there. Come on. Yeah, almost there. Okay, hold on. Boom, look at that. Okay. Look, okay, there's that one side. Here we go. What next? Damn. I know how to do this. Come on. Come on. Come on. I know exactly what I'm doing. Come on. Please. This is good. Yep, okay, we got the second layer. Cool, now what? Yeah, okay. What do I do next? I almost forgot. No, okay. Okay, I think, no. Damn. Oh no, that's right. Okay. What's next? Okay. Yeah, like that. What? Oh, okay. I'm nervous. Okay. Okay, almost there. Bam, okay, cool. Yeah, yes. Yeah. Celebrate. Yes, celebrating. Googy morning. That's the show. Googy morning. That's what we're doing. Okay. Hex, bring it up. Bring up the lower third. I'm trying to make the edit. Guys, this is Googy Morning. It's the show where every Saturday morning, me, Riley Soliner, helps you get Googy. They make these weekly edits now where they're showing you what happened last week. And I'm anticipating that there's not going to be a big, snappy moment for us to celebrate around. So I'm trying to front load the top of the show with something a little visual, something a little loud. So like, what else? Do you like to get Googy? Do you not even know what getting Googy means? Well, hey, that's no problem. Come join me, Riley Soliner, for Googy Morning, the weekly celebration of getting Googy in the morning for you, for me, for the googiness of the internet. All right. I think I worked myself into a good mood, a googie, you know. All right. First of all, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me. What is this, the 5th episode? Very nice. Very happy. What is this show? Googie Morning is a weekly interactive show on Planet Scum. Who am I? My name is Riley Soliner. I'm an actor and a writer and a comedian in New York. I used to play, sometimes I still do play, a character called Vacation Jason. He likes to get googie. Right now, I'm just a white guy with a beard. Sorry. How does this work? Well, you can chat along. You can participate. This week, I've been trying to do something where week to week, I'm alternating left brain and right brain. On the right brain weeks, like last week, I sat and I did my little drawings. I have one of my drawings on my t-shirt. I made a little print. Last week, I drew these postcards in my signature Space Noodle style. It was fun. We had musicians. Oh, good. You're already receiving your postcards. That's right. So these are postcards that I was drawing and sending out to people who were donating to Planet Scum. You can support this show by going to PlanetScum.live, clicking on support this show, hitting in the drop-down menu Googie Morning, and sending us some money via PayPal. Now, if you send me $20 or more, I'll send you a postcard. We'll get in touch with you. We'll get your address, and I'll send you one of these with a little personalized thank you. A portion of the proceeds, they break down like this. Some of the money goes to keeping the lights on and supporting the people behind the scenes like Hex, Bryson, Jess, and even Chris Gethard. Some of the money goes to me. The money that goes to me, I'm going to cut it in half and send it to the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. It's the second week in a row that I'm going to support this Atlanta Solidarity Fund. So yeah, if you want a postcard, I'll be drawing more of these next week, or maybe I'll draw a poster. I don't know. But thank you for supporting us and the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. So this week is a left brain week. We're going to do some thinking. We're going to talk about the book that we read. The book that I read. I hope you read it too. It was short, easy to find online. Angela Davis's Are Prisons Obsolete? Now, before we get into the book club, let's talk about book clubs in general for a moment, because I was feeling good all week, and then got some nice, sobering, necessary literature that fell into my news feed that was relevant. So I found an article on, oh God, here, it's in another window. It's called, really quick, just going to pull this up. Fuck, can't find it. Perfect. Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay. It's a column called Very Online on a website called bitchmedia.org. Rachel Lewis writes, anti-racist readers are plaguing the DMs of Black people. This is a great article because it talks about how the big trend right now is white people like me going, oh, what can I do? And then forming book clubs to combat racism. And look, I've put a lot of mental energy and I think a lot of stake into reading and showing that I have read and showing that I am an anti-racist. And while I have been conscious of and determined to not burden people of color with unnecessary, unpaid, emotional labor by asking them for book recommendations, I have been doing that thing of going like, guys, if we just read and get informed, we're going to be better people, right? So look, I know that's not the only answer. I know that as a white Jew, passing as just a regular old white guy, I got to use my white privilege beyond just educating myself. I am trying to use my tiny platform. Wait, hold on. I'm getting some private messages. Okay. Quick clarification. The money does not go to Chris Gethard. So cool. Any money that you want to send me, send Planet Scum. It's not going to Chris Gethard. However that makes you feel, that's cool. Where was I? So look, I'm doing this partially as a way to use my platform to create a group discussion around good books that I feel like we all should be reading at this relevant time. Bam, 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 bam. And I'm also trying to hold myself accountable by publicly doing what I said I was going to do, reading books about the heavy issues that we are all aware of. And hopefully, by processing this heavy information, much like some kind of athlete, things don't seem as heavy because we are training ourselves to process them and lift them. What else? Oh, the article also made a great point that, hey, maybe all you white people doing book clubs, you should actually pay a person of color to facilitate a book club, someone who actually has some experience and expertise on the subject. I think that's a great idea. I read this article last night, so I didn't really want to frantically try to reach out to somebody and kind of force them to facilitate my book club for the small amount of money I could provide them. But we'll do a right brain episode next week, and then the week after that we'll do a left brain one with another book. So this week we can choose a book. I can do some research. I can reach out to some people in my network, and then hopefully I can find someone to facilitate. Because that's another thing about today's episode. I will be asking you to join me, much like we asked people to join as a musician or a flower arranger to do their relaxing activity next to mine. If you want to join in on the discussion this week, please join in. Because while we do have prompts for discussion, and I'll be looking to the chat for that, it's also going to help for you to discuss. Because I've never run a book club before. It's the Vacation Jason Book Club. I'm not well, I am, you know, I'm, how do I, like, I'm not good at this yet. Trying to get better at this. But I don't know what I'm doing. So low expectations. I'm trying to make it no expectations. Let's just see how it goes. This is fun. This will make the cut, right? This is going to be in the highlight reel for next week. Cool. We're about 20 minutes in. It's time to go. Thank you for being here. Someone's reassuring me that I'm not old. Did I say that I'm old? I probably did. Sometimes I feel old. I'm trying to keep up with, you know, the TikTokers, whatever. If you want to talk with me and you're in the Planet Scum Discord, just DM Bryson. If you're not in the Planet Scum Discord, download the app, find Planet Scum, and talk with me. Let's talk a little bit about the book. Let's see. Ring capacity. I'm doing this backwards. I'm watching the discussion before reading the book. Cool. That's fine. Couple other things I'll recommend. 13th on Netflix is a great companion piece. And I just found a documentary. A lot of stuff about Angela Davis is popping up in my feed lately. So I'm just kind of collecting things as they come up. And part of that is going to be relevant to the book club. But there's a website called Tubi TV. That's spelled TUBI.TV.com. And there's a free hour and 42-minute long documentary called Free Angela and All Political Prisoners. I'm going to be watching that later today. Cool, yeah. And 13th, if you don't have a subscription to Netflix, is currently free on Netflix's YouTube channel. So watch 13th. And okay, before we get into the book club, Hex, hit me with that lower third because we got a snack break. Do a quick recharge after all of that information overload. Oh, my thing isn't working right now. But look, we got mixed nuts. You guys like mixed nuts? We got Brazil nuts. We got a pecan. We got a roasted and salted almond. We got a cashew. And later on, I'm going to be biting into this nectarine. Okay, snack time for now is over. We got our protein, we got our carbs, we got our fresh fruit. All right, and Chrono just ate a soft pretzel. Beautiful. What are you in Philadelphia? Okay. Are prisons obsolete? What a great question. I think that's my favorite thing about this book, is that there was not a relatively large amount of time spent discussing alternatives. There is a final chapter where a few alternatives are presented, but most of this book was a comprehensive description of the history of capital punishment in the United States, how it operates, how it integrated big business into what we call the prison industrial complex. It talked about the gender disparity between men and women's prisons, convict leasing as a program to get cheap labor for the state and for eventually products in the prison industrial complex. So we got a lot to cover. Here's another one of those things I found on Twitter. I reached out to the author of these questions. They gave me permission to use these. So thank you to You're Doing Great. You can give them a follow. But we have some question prompts. We have some discussion prompts. So again, feel free to DM Bryson if you want to get on a conversation. I'll be looking at the chat as well. Let's bring up question number 1. Why do prisons exist? I have some answers. I'm going to throw them out there. Let's see. Well, we got the Googy. There we go. So why do prisons exist? Well, to punish people, right? To keep them away from law-abiding citizens, right? There's like a difference between lawbreakers and criminals, but they all get sent to prison. And here's that low expectation thing. I'm not yet eloquent about talking about this stuff, but what struck me as very important was the idea that prisons were originally just jails and kind of an intermediary point between capturing a criminal or a lawbreaker and the actual punishment. And over time, as jails turned to prisons and prison became a more modernized, codified, systemized thing, prison just became the punishment in and of itself. There was a movement, like a kind of a fundamentalist religious movement at the kind of systematic decision-making levels of the personnel doing the conceptualizing of prison that said, hey, look, we have to give criminals and lawbreakers time alone, isolated, for them to rehabilitate themselves. This needs to be a largely, like a Christian thing, to give people time to pray and all this stuff, without really considering the ramifications of leaving someone totally alone in a cage for what is now like a minimum of sometimes 23 and a half hours a day, makes people go insane and doesn't rehabilitate them, but rather transforms them into people that have so many problems that they're pretty much guaranteed to end up back into the system very shortly, right? To de-incentivize crime. Yeah, right? It's a pretty scary thought to break a law and be locked away for years, right? So kind of rather than, it's just kind of like fear-based avoidance of extremely disproportionate consequences to a crime that might not be so bad, like drug use, right? That's just an example. Yeah, prisons are not created with the intention or resources to break the cycle. I got to go back and read this chapter again, because it's at least, I mean, it's very hard to take these people at their word, but it seems like their public intention was to do just that. But over time, as prison became like a modern, gigantic institution with billions of dollars flowing in and out, yeah, and taking away any kind of social programs to rehabilitate, taking away people's books, there's very little, or in some cases looks like there's no intention to rehabilitate. Rather, there seems to be the intention to just keep people in there as long as possible for their free labor, send them out with no access to resources for rehabilitation, and then nab them for something as soon as possible to bring them back into that system and exploit them for even longer as free labor. I'm reading these comments. Thank you for joining. Punishment for punishment's sake. No real way to learn from the mistakes or address the causes of the mistake. That's right. Interesting that punishment before was for the crowd as a means to deter others from committing crime, whereas prisons evolved into this religious reflection and rehabilitation. Yeah. Yes, and what am I supposed to say to that? It's true. The second question is, what, if anything, is the problem with prisons? Beyond what we just discussed? Let's see, I wrote a couple notes. They're a modernized form of slavery, right? Slavery was abolished. The 13th Amendment was written, which stated a loophole that slavery was illegal unless, of course, you committed a crime and were incarcerated. Okay, I'm going to discuss this comment because it looks like something urgent. Here we go. Miloshka the Mighty writes, hate to pull a Foucault here, but inpatient hospitalization and even schools are also designed to be like prisons as a mean to punish if and when the individual breaks the realm's laws. And both of these have racism undermining either of these days, with a lot of school anti-drug programs being a goddamn pipeline to jail for people of color of no reason other than being people of color. I say this as I was raised in a mostly rich and white county, and this was always the case. It's the same with inpatient. There is a question later on in these prompts that talks about schools, but I hadn't considered the inpatient argument as well. Yeah, don't hate to pull a Foucault here. First of all, I haven't read Foucault. He's mentioned in the book. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. But yes, there is a question later on that asks, how are schools and prisons similar? And we'll get to that. So thank you for bringing that up. Being inpatient, being in a hospital, yeah, that can easily lead to unnecessary incarceration, because let's say you get hit by a car, you go in, they give you a drug test involuntarily, they find out you have an illegal drug in your system, bam, and then they charge you for something, right? Or they just go through your pockets while you're in surgery, and then they find contraband, right? Foucault is how you pronounce it. Thank you. We're all learning here. Foucault. Hey, I read some Foucault today. It was real enlightening. Okay. Don't make fun of Southern people. That's classist. Okay. Don't associate being Southern with being uneducated. All right. Bad time to chew on a Brazil nut. They are huge. So, Brazil nuts are the Cadillac of nuts. They got a lot of selenium, which I think is a compound that helps maintain the cartilage in your knees. So, what's the problem with prisons? They're a modernized form of slavery. This is something that I learned from the book, convict leasing. Convicts are leased out, much like property, to companies to do their cheap labor. We're going to get into what this cheap labor is used for later. But basically, prisons and the justice system is incentivized to incarcerate people, to fill these prisons, and to provide the companies dependent on labor with cheap labor, right? That's a big problem right there. Yeah. Come on, guys. You see me flapping for air here. I'm doing the best I can, though. Victoria's Secret bras are sewn in prison. Not so sexy now. Okay. What's another problem with prisons? They don't adequately rehabilitate convicts. We've been over that, but also, beyond just trapping people in a cage in a violent environment where they're being taken advantage of by the staff at the prison, they're systematically year by year cutting funding for the things that actually rehabilitate people. The money to be made off of prison labor is prioritized above the safety and well-being of the convicts. I think I've been over that already. That's just a note that I had. I think we should just move on to the next questions. Questions 3 and 4. If you guys want to do some light Googling, this is pretty easy information to find. But what is the prison population in your city or state? Okay, I Googled New York State prison population. In 2019, 54,700 people in 54 different correctional facilities. So it's just too many. And these are people oftentimes, like, we know these are disproportionately severe punishments for relatively minor offenses. People are in there for repeat offenses that are not necessarily being like actually doing harm to other people, but rather there's just very extremely restrictive probation laws, that they're breaking curfew, or they are moving without telling their probation officer, boom, right back in prison. Thanks for the encouragement. I'm reading in the chat. Okay. Oh, and here's another question. What percentage of people in prison are Black? Black people make up 16% of the total population in New York State, but 54% of the prison population. Latinx people, 18% of the total population in New York State, but 22% of the prison population in New York State. I couldn't find the statistic for transgendered people. If anyone else wants to put that up, we're looking at some Canadian statistics right here. Indigenous folks make up 3% of the population and 20 to 50% of the prison population in Canada. Okay, so obviously, superficially, people will argue that mass incarceration is not a modernized form of slavery. However, when you think of the fact that there's that loophole of the 13th Amendment after prison was abolished, and then all these rules, all these laws, all these things for like minor offenses like noise complaints or just, loitering, things like that became life sentences for people forced into, chain gangs, forced labor, making the railroads, making the roads, and then eventually leading to things like making cheap products that we all consume. That, and then and then of course the laws were mostly targeting Black people in the 1800s, and then Jim Crow, and then 94 crime bill. We can just see a timeline of targeted, discriminatory, disproportionate targeting of minorities. It's pretty clear. It's just something that I'm going to say, privileged white people avoid talking about, either because it's uncomfortable or because the information is public, but just kind of swept under the rug of a public discussion. It's not fun to talk about. It's not fun to consider that we are complicit in this process. And I know that like I went home, in January, and my nieces were watching a marathon of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And I know I've watched years and years of like Reno 911 as an example of just like, yeah, let's make police cool. Let's make them palatable. Reno 911 did a little, I don't know why I'm discussing the nuances of police comedy right now, but they at least portrayed comedians portraying police as buffoons, but like lovable buffoons, right? Jail isn't so bad because the cops are aloof. But like there's conditioning from all sides, from either don't talk about it to misleading arguments like black on black crime, to it's not so bad in prison, to just cultural conditioning of like, hey, look, I know some cool cops, or I know that the cops I see on TV are cool. Or even a show like Oz. I haven't seen Oz, but these are TV shows where it's like, it makes you go like, oh, I know what happens in prison. And we don't. Okay, the fact that Sam Cooke wrote a fucking bot about chain gangs is a sign that something is very wrong with our country. Sure. But even then, like, how many people hear that song and independently investigate the deeper meaning behind it? And how many people just hear it and go like, okay, well, now I got a positive association with this thing that is, it's sad. Oh no, chain gang. it's more than sad. It's kind of like a long, drawn-out genocidal operation, right? Okay. Snack break. This nectarine, it's not the most ripe. It's pretty good though. What snacks are you up to? Do you have a snack? My Chaosilator ran out of batteries, so I can't do a song for snack time right now. Again, if you'd like to be a part of this discussion, feel free to DM Bryson in the Discord, and then he'll give you the link. We'll pop up, and we can discuss this together. I appreciate everyone talking in the comments right there, in the chat. Sweet nectarine. Okay. Broke Physics says nectarines are greater than peaches. Don't at me. I'm adding you right now. Here's the thing. They're both good. Sometimes one is better than the other. It really comes down to, I mean, you know this. So sometimes you get a bad one. I don't know. All right. Seeing a good comment here talking about states where weed is legal, but our prisons are still filled with people arrested for minor drug charges. Yeah. Hypocritical. Get them out of the prisons, wipe their records, expunge them, and set, if they were selling drugs, maybe recognize them as a professional in a specialized field, give them a little bit of a reparation for all the trauma and the time spent in prison so that they can start their own small business, right? If it's legal now. Okay. While we're still on snack break, here's a quick question. What should be the next book that we read? I have a couple suggestions to keep in mind. I'm really enjoying Angela Davis, so maybe we could keep it on theme with author. Maybe we could keep it on theme with queer Black authors. Maybe we could keep it on theme with crime and punishment. Verso Books released The End of Policing for free. So that's a little bit of an easily accessible. It's a longer book, but it's free from the publisher and very relevant. And then, I don't know, or we could read something like, check this out. And after I finish this nectarine, we're going to get back to the questions. But a nice guy reached out to me when I had some book recommendations on decolonizing my Americanized white male mind. This guy reached out with a couple book recommendations and also a documentary recommendation for this documentary called Grief Walker, all one word, Grief Walker, about a guy named Stephen Jenkinson who has a master's in the traditions of indigenous peoples around the world regarding their perspective on grief. Very cool, fascinating documentary. I think it was free with commercials on a website called Voodoo, VUDU.com, Grief Walker. And it highlighted the idea that let's see, the basic premise of the documentary that this guy was talking about, Stephen Jenkinson, is that any culture worth its name has ingrained into its traditions a way to reconcile with grief. Grief is something that that these cultures do not shy away from because they have a well-functioning process for confronting grief. It's something we all face, but in a modern, mostly white American culture, grief, like everything else, has become an industry. The death industry, Costco selling caskets kind of stuff. So that may be why, I mean, I'll just speak personally, that may be why life, no matter what, feels so shallow and superficial and mysterious. I mean, it's always going to feel mysterious, but a great portion of the mystery of life has to do with loss and grief, and there isn't a great codified practice. There's nobody guiding us through confronting these feelings. So it's something that everyone experiences. It's something that we all will go through. And yet, while it is a daily part of certain cultures, it is so fiercely avoided by us. So prudential. Every U.S. president has made life worse for Black people. Yeah, we could get into that. From a native daughter, Angela Davis, prize-winning author, Hawaiian Sovereignty. Wow. Okay. So that was me just kind of rambling about a documentary I watched and thinking about reading up on that more. But yeah, please keep recommending books. Bryson, I don't know if this is too much work for you, but if you want to collect each title being recommended, I know Communist Manifesto was being recommended. I was also, a lot of my recommendations and suggestions are being dictated by the fact that I'm on Twitter 18 hours a day. And sometimes someone will post something like, here is a collection of video essays to help you properly discuss and analyze Karl Marx's Das Kapital. And it's like, oh, that would be interesting. We could all read and watch those things together and then reconvene and discuss. Is that something you might be into? Let me know. Communist Manifesto is another. Yeah, that's it. I want to just read Marx. Let's see. There's a great book called Policing Black Lives. It's more specific to anti-Black racism in Canada. Well, you know, our neighbor is not that different from us, right? Another Brazil nut. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. James Baldwin. That would be good. Okay. I'm getting word that someone wants to join us. And this person's name is either Sean or Doofus. Perhaps Sean Doofus. It's Sean.
Hey. Hello, Riley.
How's it going?
It's Saturday. Saturday's nice. It's a Googy morning, man. Yeah. Bryson said that I should talk about the book I recommended in the chat. I'm reading From a Native Daughter right now and it's about Hawaiian sovereignty. In last year, the lady who wrote the book, she won the Angela Davis Prize, which is like, I don't know, some kind of American Studies award. She's a professor at the University of Hawaii. So the book is about how to describe it. It like takes you through colonial and imperialism in Hawaii and other Pacific islands, and then it talks about how colonialism and imperialism continues through the use of tourism in Hawaii now.
Are you joining us from Hawaii today?
No. I live in Wisconsin, which is very much the opposite of Hawaii. It's very cold, but my family is from Kiribati, which is like a very small like country in the Central Pacific. Like there's only 100,000 people who live there. So I started reading the book last week because I read Are Prisons Obsolete in college, and then I have this shirt actually is the author, weirdly enough.
Cool.
And when I was reading it, then I Googled to try and find some analyses, and the lady who wrote this book, Hanani K. Trask, she had written an analysis on Are Prisons Obsolete, and I read through that, and yeah.
That's great. Are you familiar with Fred from Honolulu?
Yeah. Yes.
He posted on Twitter.
Yes, since 2011. So yeah.
Excellent, man. He posted on Twitter recently a thread about the statue of King Kamehameha, and how I really don't want to screw this up. It has been whitewashed over time. The message of the statue, it used to be like the original intention of the statue, and even its pose, and the fact that the king is holding a spear in the statue. Mm-hmm. It's all about anyone who wants to challenge us and our sovereignty. Come at us, try us.
Yeah.
And to kind of placate, sand over that kind of rough edge, make it gentle and accommodating for tourism, basically. But even that message spreading into the school system, it's kind of like now taught as like, a welcoming kind of like aloha vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's how, the whole book goes into how sort of the Hawaiian like thought on yourself changed. And then actually the author, Hanani K. Trask, she gave a pretty good speech in the early 90s about how like we as islanders have used our culture to make money, but we need to use our culture to like gain political power, and that you can't separate the two from each other, because historically the dancing and the feasts and all of that stuff was connected to gaining political power, and we've sort of taken all of the political aspects out of it and made it just a cultural thing so that we can sell things, and that's not how you should behave. Like, cultural people have to be political people. You can't use like this, like we're using the comedy community that we've built around the Planet Scum Discord to talk about political issues. And that's what you need to be doing as like a person of color or as a brown person. You need to use the cultural aspect of your life to become more politically active, and using that to like get further, make gains about the things that you care about. And, as like the things that I care about specifically politically are like, the refugee definition needs to be expanded to include climate change and the people like my family who will be affected by rising sea levels. And when if COVID wasn't going on right now, I'd be at like a gathering every summer. The last week of June happens of all the Kiribati people who live in the United States. And normally we use that to like invite people in and talk to them about what's happening in our country. And none of that gets to happen, but I think it's good that we're taking the time right now in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor to like, Black and brown people have to be a coalition to expose racism and do something about it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be something if we could actually incite enough change to dismantle patriarchy, capitalism, and industrial mass incarceration, so that we could address the bigger issue of people being displaced by the global world.
Yeah. All of it is. The other night when Murph was talking, he talked about it as a like pyramid, but I see all of those problems as more like a chain link fence. Like they hold each other up and like they act as a fence to keep all people down.
Yeah, it's not hierarchical. It's like a network.
Yeah. Patriarchy and racism and the things that come with it, they act to enforce a wall around mass incarceration, around gender discrimination, around trans discrimination. These are all things that we need to address. And I think the mass protests we've seen across the country are going to actually lead to something. I think I can't really talk about what I do for a living, but I work for people in power, and even them who I've had conversations in the past who are dismissive of addressing these issues now have a completely different tone about all of it. And hopefully that can lead to, we need to dismantle these things, and the time is running out for us to do that. And there's too many things happening that we've put off for too long, and we have to do it now before it's too late. I think my favorite sign from the protests has been, someone made a sign at one of the Oakland protests that said, "You fucked with the last generation." And I think that's how we're all approaching it as young people, but also like, change is coming more swiftly than it ever has before. And hopefully things do actually change for the better, because there's too many people in prison. There's too many people in poverty. There's too many people, dying at the hands of police power. And, talking about this book, Are Prisons Obsolete? Since 1992, violent crime is way down, but like the number of people in prison, the number of people suffering at the hands of violent police officers, which is state-sanctioned violence, which is unacceptable, is on the rise, and that's fucked up. So we have to do something.
And also the amount of violent crime represented in news media, is pretty much the same. Yeah. So it's just they make it seem as if the problem is as drastic as it was when the numbers go down. Yeah.
No, it's all terrible. So I'm glad that we're talking about this book today, because I think it's.
Would you like to join me as we look at the next discussion prompts?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I don't want to stay too long, but yeah, absolutely.
Hey man, I'm happy you're here. Everyone in the chat loves you. We have Steph, who is also in Wisconsin. Happy to see two people from Wisconsin here today.
Yeah, that's great. No, I just the other day, protests were more violent than normal here in Madison, and I use violence just to say that things happened. They tore down statues here. I live in Madison on the Capitol Square, and there are two statues on the Capitol. One is of an abolitionist who fought in the Union, and another is of a lady who represents the state's motto is forward. And Black Lives Matter protesters tore down both statues, which I think, the thing about living in Madison is that it likes to pretend that it's a very progressive, forward-thinking place. But, on the square, which is where most of the city is, there are no Black-owned businesses. There zero. And on the 4 surrounding blocks, there are no Black-owned businesses. I think there are a lot of places across the country that are majority white and vote very progressive. I mean, the chair of the Progressive Caucus is the congressman from Madison, Mark Pocan. He's, one of the most progressive members of Congress. But I think people think that they've done that, vote for someone who is very progressive to be in Congress. And then that's all they have to do.
Right. Yeah. Absolved.
Right. Yeah. Problems are done. There's no racism here, blah, blah, blah. But like, even here, I think I've lived in here, Kansas City, Des Moines, Los Angeles, Seattle. And I think I've experienced more personal racism in this city than I did in any of those other places. And when I tell people that, they're astounded. Like,
oh no, what? That's not yeah.
Right.
I'm from the Bay Area in California. My parents are like part of a hippie commune.
Yeah.
I grew up mostly in a suburb called Albany, which is like, I used to joke is like Diet Berkeley, where just quirky in a little bit more of a family-friendly way, and just it's small, and it's like, I feel like there was this attitude of like, everyone here is absolved of the necessary work to be anti-racist or more progressive because of our history of activism within the larger community here, or because of our geographical location and because of our reputation. And it like, I didn't realize until years after I had left how insidious that kind of attitude is. And what it really allows for is for people to get lazy or get comfortable with casual racism or just things that they're not properly processing. Albany what is always kind of like, we're diverse. We got this great school system. And it's like, if you look into the history of it, public transit doesn't go through Albany. It like goes on both north and south borders, but not in the middle, because they didn't want Black people moving in to Albany.
Yeah.
And all the property that was sold in Albany went to white people and eventually to Asian people, no Black people.
Yeah.
And it was just extremely easy to like, for everyone to kind of collectively pat themselves on the back in Albany for like, hey, Berkeley's their neighbor right over here. We can see San Francisco right over there. We got this inclusive vibe.
Yeah.
But thinking back about the curriculum in our schools, thinking about like who I saw the police officer at our school stopping every day, for no reason, thinking about the things me and my white friends got away with, it makes me question the I want to say the liberal qualities of any so-called liberal state. I mean, I read the articles about redlining that I've good about just, okay. Thank you for joining me, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also, here, let's take down the questions real quick, because I want to ask you about this, because this is something that's been on my mind since I started Googy Morning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also holding a Gethard Show pencil right now. Okay. Vacation Jason.
Yeah.
The character that I play. Started out as a goofy, clowny caricature of tourist culture, specifically Hawaiian tourist culture.
Yeah.
I've only been to Hawaii once. And, and it was a very touristy, lovely time. But, like it is, the character is mostly two things. It's my goofy enthusiasm for the kind of superficial caricature of like luau party bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And the deeper intention within that was and is a send up of the fact that people who live by those kind of googie ideals are not as deep as they think they are. And they're not as chill as they say they are. I know a lot of hippies, tie-dye dudes and dudettes with a lot of unresolved anger issues.
Yeah.
And so, like the darkness of the character and the bitterness of the character hidden underneath, the floral shirt and the flower lei and kind of stuff. And then, from there comes my personal, me as a performer and writer, enthusiasm for things like goofy hip hop songs, and so over time, and especially like not wanting to be funny on Googy Morning, which is its own thing, but like I'm looking back on me doing this character, and then all of the instances of like comedians like making their like tearful apologies for ironic racism. And then it makes me wonder, like, okay, is this character I'm playing as satirical as my intention? Question mark. Is this character as satirical as my intention?
I mean, yeah. I think I would want to. I don't want to speak for the entirety of my race, so I think it's fine. I think it's funny. I think as long as it's funny and the satire is there, I think it's fine. I've only gotten more like sort of radical about not wanting my culture appropriated in the last few years, and I think the anger is there. I mean, we had a whole episode where you wrestled John Hamm, so I think we understand that he is a person who is very angry about some things in the world. So I think that's fine. I didn't, I was seeing this woman recently, and before all this started, and I didn't care to keep it up in quarantine. And every summer she throws a luau, and
in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this January, when we started hanging out, she was like very excited that I would be able to come to the luau because now there would be an actual Polynesian person with them. And I think that's where it crosses the line, where it's like, oh, you get to be like a part of the show and on display. Mm-hmm. In my job, I raise money for progressive candidates, and in 2015, I worked in Iowa, and Tulsi Gabbard came to town, and I was specifically assigned from like our staff of 25 people to take her around. And then they threw us a surprise luau and had the two of us, me and Tulsi Gabbard, who I have a whole bunch of problems with, but like her and I were the only ones who were given lays at this luau. We were asked to like speak on island culture for everyone there. That stuff sort of crosses the line to me. I think your character Vacation Jason is first, it's a funny character, and second, it has like a deeper satire to it, and third, like everyone understands that it's a caricature of a specific type of person.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, like Ring Capacity is saying the character is, a hypocritical person. And I think that's understood by the audience. But also, like, I don't know, did Fred from Honolulu ever tell you to stop? Like,
no,
because he was more involved in the show.
I think my concern is after a certain, like when you do something that's intended as satirical and like a character that's hypocritical,
mm-hmm.
there can be a line crossed where it goes from the character you're portraying being hypocritical to the performer themselves doing something out of line and inappropriate, and then covering it up under the excuse of like, of course I don't believe that. That's the character. And then that kind of ties into the kind of hipster racism or ironic racism that is so prevalent in comedy. Yeah. Look, hey, I didn't do it. Hulk Hogan did it. I'm Terry Bollea,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and I'm sorry because I knew I was walking a line. I didn't want to imply that by asking you, I am
no
legitimized.
No. I didn't feel that way at all. I think
it felt relevant because of the book you brought up and
Yeah. No, I didn't feel like you were asking me to do, labor for something you feel bad about. I understand what the question was about.
Cool. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Shall we get back to
the questions?
Some are Prisons Obsolete? Hex, let's pull up those questions. Okay. What's the prison budget in your city or state? I know that the prison budget in New York State is, well, in 2019, it was recommended to be $3.295 billion, an increase of $16.2 million from 2018. And this increase includes $26 million in the capital program, offset by a reduction of $9.8 million in state operations funding. Okay, I don't really know what that second half means, but I can see 3.2 billion and an increase of 16.2 million from the year prior. That's so that's like half of annual NYPD budget.
Yeah.
That sucks. And how many prisons are in New York State? 54.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say beyond that. I mean, everyone, convicts are underfed. Their resources to build them up for a life outside of prison are cut. They're beaten, they're tortured, they're assaulted, they're given a half hour outside every day. Where is all this money going?
Yeah. No, I just to answer the question, Wisconsin spends $979 million on prisons. The state's like, a tenth the size of New York. So And the number of prisons in the state is hard to determine because the largest prison in the state is in Green Bay, and the prison was built in 1895, and so it's dilapidated, and they've started moving some of those people into temporary facilities, like, you know, the kind of mobiles that you would have at a high school outside of Milwaukee. And you know, the state's now asking for, I think, like $300 million more for prisons, on top of a like operational cost increase of 7.5%, so that they can rebuild the prison in Green Bay to be up to standards. And I think that fundamentally gets at the question of, are prisons obsolete? Like, we shouldn't spend $300 million more to build a new prison. We should spend, you know, the entirety of that prison budget on rehabilitation, making these people productive members of society, and ending the mass incarceration for nonviolent drug offenses, which is that's something we could do immediately, right? Like, figuring out what to do about fixing violent criminals. It is not that's a more complicated question, but like, getting people out of prison for nonviolent crimes immediately is not a hard question. We can do that.
All that money could be such a great opportunity to like stop and rethink a problem that isn't getting any better. I mean, it's clear that there is no interest in actually fixing the problem, because across the board, the rates of the number of people incarcerated goes up, the profit margins for private prisons goes up, the amount of demand needed for free labor to maintain production of products made by convicts goes up.
Yeah.
It's all just a good business decision for them to revamp the prison and just maintain it.
Yeah. Which is fundamentally wrong. And like, I know.
Yeah, like, why call them correctional facilities after a certain point?
Right. Yeah, because you're not doing any correcting or rehabilitating. You're not. I mean, fundamentally, if we want to improve things, we have to help these people be better human beings, not put them in a cage. People in cages don't live better.
Right. And then to take, like, you know, to take everything away. I mean, one huge example in the book is taking away convicts' books so they can't educate themselves.
Yeah.
And then something that struck me, I copied a few things about like parole and life outside after being incarcerated. When you're on parole, when you're a felon on the books, you don't have access to welfare. You don't have access to public housing. You don't have access to certain licenses for certain specialized jobs.
Yeah.
So you're taking away pretty much any advantage, or not even, it's not even an advantage, just the potential to receive the help that these people would desperately need to get back on their feet.
Yeah. I mean, a connected problem, you know, in this sort of chain link, continuing the chain link metaphor from earlier, is that we've the social programs that we have in this country, a bunch of them are means tested, which means that, like, you know, you have to meet qualifications to earn these things. Mm-hmm. But these things are intended to help everyone do better. And if people have done something wrong in the past or made a mistake, we lock them out from improving themselves, which is, it's absurd. Like,
yeah, basically incentivizing you to break laws, risk getting caught, and then being sent back forever.
Right. Yeah. And most cases of recidivism in this country are parole revocations. You know, they're not like you miss a meeting with your parole officer, you go back to jail. You could have missed that meeting because you have to work at the one job that will pay you, or you could have missed it because, you know, your children are in school. Like revocations are a huge problem across this country, and we need to end them. Like ending cash bail or ending cash bail is like just one piece of the larger problem, because when people can't meet payments on their cash bail, that's a revocation. They go back to prison. Like all of these things are, we've incentivized the system to punish these people endlessly instead of rehabilitating them, which people pretend is the stated goal of the prison.
Yeah, one thing I read in the new Jim Crow is about the box that you have to check on the job application if you're a felon, a convicted felon. And that right away is just like the quickest way to disqualify yourself from employment.
Right.
People see that and they go, oh, well, we can't hire a felon.
Yeah.
And it's like, so offering up the information like you're legally required to provide disqualifies you from pretty much any job. I remember I read that book, and then I went to dinner with like a friend of a friend who was kind of on the wealthier side, and then just like the question of like, why can't homeless people just get a job?
Right.
And it's like, well, you need an address, a phone number. You need to not be a felon, which if you are one and then you can't get a job, you're out on the street.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's keep it going. I'm enjoying the pace of the conversation right now. Let's go to those next questions. We have I have some notes written here too. But oh God. Okay. We're getting Googy. How, if at all, is prison labor? Oh yeah. Okay. Is this it? No. Oh God, I lost my place. I'm sorry, guys.
You're doing great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. First prison was opened in 1790 in the United States. Can you name an institution from the same time period that still exists? This is for me, the softball answers were slavery, the U.S. National Guard, taxes, and just 3 branches of government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shell Oil Company still exists. Dutch.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
a Dutch company, so that's different.
Bayer? I'm thinking like pharmaceutical, something. I don't know. That's an old one.
Yeah, companies that are terrible people, they still exist.
Yeah, post office. That's a good one I'm seeing in the chat.
Post office is a positive.
That's true. We're keeping the post office going here. We got postcards.
And the post office, I mean, while we're talking about changing things fundamentally, could be doing so much more. We could use that to do so much more. People could get addresses there for free,
Sure. And postal banking was a big part of or was at least a small part of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Okay, I feel like we already covered most of this, but do prisons rehabilitate? How or how not? I'll just quickly read what I wrote to prep, but it seems that the true intended goal of a prison is to use the convict for free labor, strip them of their rights, and do everything to ensure they'll end up back in prison after serving their sentence. Over time, it's increasingly clear that they are doing anything they can to move away from a rehabilitative model, and that there's a trend of prisoners being denied their rights to libraries. The funds used for rehabilitative services in prisons are systematically cut. We covered it.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next questions. Oh, you know what? Okay, yeah. How is prison labor used in your city or state? This was an illuminating Google search. I mean, the most obvious and one of the most egregious examples, Governor Amazon Cuomo and his hand sanitizer when the quarantine just started, or not even the quarantine, but just he was, it's a national news story how unprepared and lackadaisical they were rolling this out. But I found out about Corecraft, which is the company in New York State that uses prison labor to fabricate different things like textiles, metalwork, and they also staff out convicts to answer the phones for DMVs. And oh god, I have a tab open. Let me see if I can find it real quick, because not only did I find out about all these different things that okay, yeah, here we go. So I'm listing different New York State correctional facilities and then what they do. Albion makes metal products and engravings. Attica makes metal products. Auburn, laminate furniture, seating, and license plates. Bedford Hills, Teleresponse Center for DMV. Clinton makes textiles. Coxsackie Textiles. Eastern makes highway signages, mattresses, pillows, dustpans, textiles, recycling. Elmira does printing and foundry products. Fishkill does specialty metal fabrication. So it's like, maybe this is obvious to some people, but it's like you go outside, everywhere you look is something made by modern slavery.
Yeah.
You go out on the highway, the sign was made by a prisoner. You look at the license plate, that was made by a prisoner. The hand sanitizer in your car, your engraved metal keychain, maybe the bed you sleep on. It's just like the chair in the governor's office could have been made by free labor.
Yeah, yeah.
Like 65 cents an hour labor.
No, and even I don't have the statistics for Wisconsin in front of me, but I toured through my job one time this farm that provides agriculture jobs to prisoners, which is operated by Harley Davidson. It's like their charity wing set up a farm to give foods to schools. And then instead of hiring laborers to work in these fields, they use prison labor instead. And so they end up basically bearing no burden for the costs of this charity work that they're trying to do. And they're able to pass it off to, like, it's food for schools that's grown locally and it's supposed to be organic, and that's all nice. But what they end up doing is they've created a system where they can write off entirely the cost of the agricultural products because they've used prison labor instead of hiring people to actually farm this farm they've set up. And they during the tour, they walked me through it, and they talked about how great it was to give organic free food to public school students. And then no mention was made that the people working there are prison laborers until I asked one of the laborers, like, oh, how'd you get this job? Like, why are you here? And he's like, I am in prison down the street. And in order to do something outside, I've taken this job. But like all day I work in a field and then I go back to prison.
Yeah. And another good point was made in the chat. A lot of these products being fabricated, like there's contracts with state governments that require the states to buy from these places. So it's just built in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then for the public image to be so benevolent and generous to offer organic food to people in need.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy, that convict you talked to, probably doesn't eat a single organic thing.
No. Probably not.
In there, he eats ramen noodles.
Yeah.
And he eats.
And he has to buy from a commissary that is owned by the prison. It's a fucked up feedback loop on a bunch of stuff, and it's just so like Harley Davidson can pretend like they care about giving free organic food to public school students.
So brave of them to stick their neck out like that for I also, as a side little tangent, when I Googled Corecraft, their Google Maps location pops up.
Yeah.
I live like a 20-minute walk away. I went on a walk yesterday and I was within 3 blocks of Corecraft's distribution center in my neighborhood where I've lived for 6 years.
Well, the number of things around us that are terrible that we don't see because they're not readily apparent to us, it's astronomical. The number of terrible things that are happening around us that like the facade of them looks pleasant, so you don't even think about it.
Yeah, or it's like a warehouse. Oh, it's just another warehouse,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, this is a building that has like a dock. I'm sure there's goods moving in and out of there, and it's it's really just a facility for moving prison labor goods from one place to another.
Regarding question number 4, we already discussed this, but formerly incarcerated people are barred from participating in elections. In New York State, some of the other post-incarceration punishments are can't buy firearms, can't sit on the jury, pretty standard, excluded from welfare, can't do federally funded housing, and can't hold operator licenses. It's actually pretty surprising that this is public information. I feel like, well, it's just things people aren't interested in looking up, so they don't. I know I didn't.
Yeah.
So I encourage you, wherever you are, people watching in Georgia, people watching in Wisconsin, Canada, this stuff is readily available. And then from there, I found it on the website. Just technical violations of parole include moving without discussing it with your officer, being with anyone who has a criminal record. So you could be picked up and put back for being with someone who you didn't even know had a criminal record. Or what if your family has a criminal record? Leaving the state without permission, drinking alcohol, using performance-enhancing sexual aids, including you could be prescribed for Viagra legally, and you could use it, and they can put you back in prison for using the drug you are prescribed to use. Accessing the internet, possessing a computer, visiting chat rooms or other social media sites, and not abiding to the curfew.
It's all crazy stuff.
Yeah. Question 5. How does the system of convict leasing reflect chattel slavery? List 3 ways they're similar in function and history. Well, free labor. Just, labor for industrial gain that is not passed on to the laborer. Bondage. Simple as, people being kept against their will and denying large groups of human beings their basic human rights, as discussed with the implementation of the rules restricting people from, everything from can't sit on a jury to can't drink alcohol, can't use the internet, can't chew on a Viagra pill. It's crazy to me that the 13th Amendment is so explicit in the loophole that it's like slavery is banned. except under these conditions. Like, they're not even trying to call it something else. It's just slavery is illegal unless, of course, you fall into this category.
Right. And I mean, since Reconstruction, it just incentivizes sending those people to prison. So you create laws and systems that can get them back into prison so that you can have slave labor, right? So like the difference between what we're experiencing now in this period of mass incarceration and slavery is just that we as a society are able to say that they are bad people. And so it's not a problem. They're behind.
Right, yeah, they're criminals. This was a big part. This is like a visual recurring motif in 13th, where in all the speeches from Nixon and Reagan and Bush and Clinton and Trump, they leave out Obama, but anytime they say criminal, they'll just flash the word criminal on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like this method of like association that, right. Oh, anyone in prison must be a criminal. Anyone who the police caught and captured and sentenced must be a bad person. And it's just like it's a cultural conditioning.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a fundamental tenet of the kind of racism we see in the United States. Like something, because we're going to be seeing a lot of political ads, pretty much all of us for the rest of the year. Anytime you see that they've like darkened the face of someone, that's to reinforce the like caveman part of your brain that triggers racism. Like, oh, that person's skin is darker. Like, and it's intentionally done that way. Like media consultants who can construct these political advertisements do that on purpose to take advantage of people's racism to win.
Yeah. And it's like some eugenics shit about like just like a predetermined genetic disposition for crime or evil or like,
Yeah. It's the like dark skinned stranger coming to attack you. And all of those things are like, there are tons of things that we experience every day that are designed to reinforce racism in our brains. And it's like, it has to be stopped and called out.
This next question 6, this dovetails into something I read recently, that I don't know if it was the founder, the inventor, or just one of the most public endorsers of eugenics is also the same person who invented and distributed the SATs.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of literature on this that I haven't read in a while, but yeah, the standardized testing system reinforces racism because it's designed to speak culturally to like affluent young white people, and the like questions and the way that the sentences are structured, the linguistics of it are all designed to reinforce that same affluent white background because it's written by young affluent white people, and without the like sort of cultural competency to say like, oh, this story you're talking about is not going to connect with young Black people, young brown people, like it's ignored. They don't even discuss it. And so yeah, the SATs, the ACTs, the standardized testing system that we've forced on elementary and middle school students, it's all designed by white people to talk to a white audience, and it doesn't address Black people. Brown.
And then it's passed off as just a impartial,
right?
qualifier of intelligence, and
right. And then and those tests, not that they're important, but those tests help determine your future, like where you're placed and what you can achieve academically is then, shot through the ground because you weren't able to pass this test, which doesn't speak to your experience.
Yeah, we have Steph here adding some more examples of how public school system replicates prison. structures. Yeah, bag checks, security, metal detectors. I feel like I was maybe the last generation of, or one of the last generations of kids that didn't have to go through like school shooting drills or metal detectors. Maybe it was also because I went to schools in Albany, and you know, it was more of an affluent kind of like superficially progressive place where that kind of stuff was fought tooth and nail until it just became like a epidemic in the country. But yeah, some examples I wrote down about comparing public school to prison were just an increase in the trend of like cutting the social programs intended to nurture and build up someone's potential, expose and enlighten someone's potential. And it's all kind of cut in favor of just like aggressive security measures and safety measures.
Yeah.
Police presence, surveillance, just ways to punish and isolate people. In the 90s, we're looking at We Are Trash people saying that in the 90s, they went to an inner city elementary school in the Bay Area and had no bag checks or shooting drills. It's also a big cultural, yes, it is a big cultural change. Yeah, I don't know, like there's just always been such an emphasis on singling out the bad kid or like the loud kid.
Yeah.
And then isolating them, moving them around, just all like with the out loud intention of helping this person, but really by moving them around or isolating them, punishing them, it just alienates the individual further.
Yeah.
And then I hadn't even considered like the hospital, the inpatient aspect of it. I recently reread, or maybe it was like a year ago, I reread One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I don't know, yeah, you just, whether it's like pumping someone full of drugs so that they can't think anymore, or beating someone for disobedience, taking away the resources that were making them more creative or independent.
Yeah. Well, and just thinking about that book in particular, like the reaction to it publicly was not to like try and make things better for these people. It was just to shut down these mental institutions, and we ended up just putting those people in prisons. And so like the reaction to the book should have been, how can we help these people? And instead it was, let's close these places and let's put them in prison. And it's, it creates more problems in the end.
There's more people with mental conditions,
right?
Conditions in prison than in mental institutions now.
Right. Yeah. And prison guards are not designed to speak to these people about their problems and how they can help them. They're designed to lock them up. And it's just a fundamentally wrong reaction to how we should be helping people. And then speaking to the public schools, I grew up in an affluent white suburb of Kansas City, and we had a cop in the school and 2 security guards at all times, which like I never had very many interactions with them, so it never bothered me. But then when I was in college, I was a student teacher, and I student taught at my own high school, and going back into the place and then receiving instructions on how to utilize the security guards and police officer to enforce discipline in the classroom was super fucked up. And I just remember like telling my lead teacher, like, I'm never gonna do that. And he looked at me and was like, yeah, we don't bring those people into the classroom. But we were given instructions on when to bring them into the classroom and how to utilize them to enforce discipline amongst unruly students. And it was like, we're teachers. We're not supposed to do that. Like, we're supposed to be guiding these kids to a future. And then I was student teaching to become a debate coach. And when I was in high school, we would go to, schools that were like in the city, more impoverished schools, schools that have like over, half getting free or reduced lunch. And those places, when we entered them, they'd have metal detectors and bag checks and like, the K-9 unit would come through the school. And when I was a student, my reaction to it was to like be very fearful and to make jokes about this kids going to those schools and to like generally put them down. And then once you're a teacher and you enter that school and like you understand, because when you're making those jokes, you're 17 years old. And then, just in the like 5 years time difference between being a student and being a high school debate coach, like the number of times I had to like correct students on why that was wrong is just, it was mind-blowing until we like what we did as a team is we started incorporating like a cultural competency conversation that would happen before we'd go to these schools about like, the median income at the high school I went to was like 6 figures and the median income there was like 70 grand less. And like the experience you're having as a student is very different than the experience these students are having. And you need to understand that. And eventually, I don't know, these very young kids now are much more hip to what's happening, and
yes, because like we forced it upon it from being climate refugees to the school to prison pipeline being so apparent.
Yeah. And I think the reaction from us and from people our age is that, life must suck for them, but it's fun to make jokes and have a good time. And, these young people really understand that there's like some fucked up shit happening and they're ready to do something about it, which is great. It's like glad to see it.
Yeah, me too. It's wild that it had to come to this.
Yeah.
For us to, to be woken up by, did not mean to use the word woke, but to be awakened by children in such a way. We have some conclusion slides by You're Doing Great on Twitter. I also want to point out that someone mentioned that schools and prisons are now being made by the same company, which is why the architecture is so similar. And a lot of schools are now being made without windows. It's our friend Miel. Thanks, Miel. That's a shitty. It's just what I don't know. There's nothing to say to that. It's just it sucks.
Yeah. I did see on Twitter the other day an architect say that he was like leaving his firm because they designed prisons, and I think fundamentally that's like what a lot of these people in these jobs have to do is say that I won't participate. Someone said in the chat earlier, like the only good cop is a cop who quits. So
sure, or fire him.
Yeah.
Hex. Let's bring up one of those next slides. Yeah, I was seeing that like an average of 6 cops a day from NYPD are retiring, but like even when they retire, they're still getting paid.
Right.
Okay,
and are they retiring because of bad things happening, or are they retired because they're afraid that someone's about to hold them accountable? Like,
yeah. Oh, they're just tired. Okay, let's see. Okay, I actually didn't read these yet. Okay, Dr. Davis quotes historian Marianne Curtin's observations on racialization of crime. It was the transformation of petty thievery into a felony that relegated substantial numbers of Black people to the involuntary servitude legalized by the 13th Amendment. Consider and list some of other racialized crimes that might lead to the disproportionate imprisonment of Black people. Possession of marijuana. Come on.
Yeah.
Any drug.
Well, and the thing that got George Floyd killed is before an investigation was completed or anything was found out, he allegedly had a bad check, and that's something designed to keep poor people in line, having laws about forged money and check writing that lead to arrest. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, criminalizing poverty in general.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I've seen, maybe this isn't the most extreme example, but I've been asleep on public transportation before.
Yeah.
And nothing has ever happened to me in terms of any kind of repercussion or a warning. But I've seen homeless people. I've seen Black people, people of color asleep on public transportation. Cops will do things like take their nightstick and bang the wall that they're leaning on.
Yeah.
To wake them up. Just to I haven't seen an arrest like that, but I know that it happens. No,
it's the number of things that we've allowed to expand police power, being able to arrest someone for just looking like a potential criminal is ridiculous. And the racism that goes into identifying people you think are criminals is absurd. And we can't trust that to police officers. That leads to people being in prison for, just for looking like someone. And on top of that, we've added resisting arrest to the list of crimes. And
right.
If a person is being wrongfully arrested and charged with something, they should be allowed to resist. We can't. It fundamentally violates their right to personhood. Our laws supposedly established through this English notion of the Magna Carta and habeas corpus, and that's the right to be your own person, and they're not allowed to just take you for being a person. And we've criminalized a number of those things, abandoning these principles because Black people are potentially criminals. The English people that fought for these things, in the 11th century, were doing it because they didn't want to be treated like criminals. But then, here we are 10 centuries later, and people just turned around. We're nope, you know what? Those people don't look right to me. So we can arrest them for looking suspicious.
Well, yeah, we've found ourselves in a situation where there's just such a financial incentive for maintaining such extreme, apparent, rampant persecution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hex, hit us with the next slide, please. Temp check. It's warm. Answer the questions honestly based on how you feel right now. Okay. Are prisons inherently racist? Yeah.
Pretty easily.
Yeah. And in your wildest dreams, what would happen when you cause harm? Okay. This will be a nice way to end, hopefully. But the last chapter of Are Prisons Obsolete introduces a concept that I was introduced to a year ago, and I would like to do more research on it because I had never heard of this. I was at my friend's house. I picked up a book on restorative justice, which I had never heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
And he relayed to me a very simple story of a time like restorative justice is kind of like in a pilot program mode in some Oakland public schools. The kid was, throwing a fit in a bathroom, and he punched the paper towel machine off the wall. And instead of like being arrested or suspended or expelled or anything like that, they put this kid through the process of, being given a budget to purchase the paper towel machine that he had to replace, and then working with the custodial services at the school to, repair the wall, then put the equipment, the newly purchased equipment, back on the wall. And so it just, instead of telling him to like sit over there or you're expelled or anything like that, he's given a lesson, an education, an active education on how to restore what he fixed. And critics of restorative justice, I know that this is such a reductive, not very complete idea of restorative justice, but the end of the story is that like critics of restorative justice will say things like, oh, well, that kid probably enjoyed having to do all that. And the response to that is good.
Yeah.
Like it's good for someone to come away with a positive experience of rehabilitation and restoring, like taking an active role in restoring what they had disrupted.
Yeah. No, I mean, that example, because the lesson you're trying to teach the kid is that the thing you broke is expensive and it costs the school money, and fixing it is going to cost labor from the custodial service. By walking the kid through everything that has to happen to fix what is essentially like an unimportant item, helps that kid learn like, oh, when I break something, that creates a lot of work for other people. And those are the kinds of lessons we need to be teaching all kids. They need to fundamentally understand that like we live in a society that we should all be lifting each other up and trying to make things easier and better for each of us.
It's also not this like false, like disproportionate, extreme punishment for, I mean, yes, school property is important and there's a lot that goes into repairing things and maintaining things,
right?
But it's not like it's no longer you destroyed this property that we're going to fix anyway.
Yeah.
We're going to take your rights away, or we're going to strip you of your potential.
Right. Yeah. It's exactly what Steph is saying in the chat. Like, we have to like address what the underlying issue is and teach people, how they can help each other. All of us should be acting at all times to help each other.
There's also a really interesting concept. Again, I'm unfamiliar, so maybe this could be one of the book recommendations, because I feel like learning about restorative justice feels like a good proactive. Like we're learning about one side of how prisons are obsolete, then we could learn about an updated, necessary model for radical change. Just pitching that idea. But the concept that is still new to me is the idea that someone disrupts the peace.
Yeah.
Instead of just being punished, they're brought into a circle discussion with the people that were wronged, the people that were disrupted, the people in charge of the punishment, the rehabilitation, whatever. And everyone in the circle, including the people that are the offenders, are asked, what do you need? How are your needs not being met?
Yeah.
And it's such a radical change from just straight up punishment, and we're telling you what you need to put you away and fix you, but to actually consider where your needs aren't being met is like so foreign that it was just like such an immediately attractive idea to me.
Yeah. I think that's Yeah, I mean, we should. I think it would be great to talk about restorative justice. I think that's one of those things that not enough people understand, like how, like when people talk about abolishing prisons and ending police, they don't really understand how we would, address the problems in society, because their natural reaction is to say punishment is the right answer. And in reality, like, we need to address what people need and how we can help them and make life better for them. When I was in college, I volunteer at this homeless shelter, and the homeless population in the shelter would say that, like, the hardest thing that they were actually going through is that people on the streets didn't treat them as people. That the thing that was actually making them go crazy is that they were sitting and asking people for help, and no one was responding to them. They're just like walking by, and that's like, so like the underlying issue for a lot of them was that they were not being treated as human beings, and that it was hard to, like, motivate yourself to get up each day and try and fix, the material issues that you were facing when you feel like you're subhuman to the people.
When nobody even wants to look at you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, people just walk on by, they don't hear what you're saying. So the thing that the shelter was trying to address is, like, getting those people in conversations with people who are, living, normal, in quotes, lives. And I mean, I think that's a lesson we need to apply across the board, that people have problems, and when people ignore them, or people, turn to the carceral state as a way to punish them before addressing the actual problem, these people feel like they're not human beings. They're not equal to the rest of us. And when that happens, their sense of humanity goes away. And I can't remember which philosopher talks about, being subhuman is the worst condition, but, like, that's how we treat people in chattel slavery. That's how we treat people incarcerated. We treat them as not human beings, and that's fundamentally wrong, and speaks to, like, an evil of humanity that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Yes. Well put. I don't know what else to say to that. Let's move on to the last slide.
Okay. Yeah.
A little bit of some vocab. Always read with a dictionary close by. The goal is to absorb context and build a mental glossary. Ardent, intensely devoted, eager, or enthusiastic, zealous. I am ardently devoted. No, that's redundant. I am ardently pursuing knowledge and enlightenment on the condition of our underserved population and the conditions that fail them.
Yeah.
I don't know why I feel like I have to use these vocab words right away to prove that I'm learning. Impute, to attribute or describe. Our carceral state imputes a disproportionate amount of Black and brown people to criminal tendencies. Recapitulate, to review by a brief summary, summarize. Every other week on Googy Morning, we recapitulate books on relevant topics. Is this helping?
No, this is good. I think, yeah, man, people learn through hearing. Like, yeah, this is good.
Surreptitiously, stealthily, create secret or unauthorized, clandestine. The prison industrial complex surreptitiously uses prison labor to deliver us products that bring us convenience and comfort. Is there more vocab builder, or are these just the? Is this just the one? I think this is just the one. Thanks, Andy Blandy. I'm going to pass my vocab test for sure. I think I do pretty well with vocab in general, but I love to learn, especially these days. Let's see. As a palate cleanser, I think it would be a good time to try and make the edit once again. Every week on Planet Scum, they're doing these hot edits to attract or retain an audience. So, Sean, would you like to join me in trying to make the edit?
Sure. I'm not. Do I remember what this is? I don't think I do. But
okay. Early on in the show, I tried to make the show seem a little bit more snappy than a book club about society's ills.
Yeah.
So I said something like, "Ooh yeah, Googy Morning, the show where every week we're getting googie in our minds, in our society, and on the internet airwaves."
Okay. Yeah.
How go. That's the clip right there.
Okay.
Cool, man. Sean, I cannot thank you enough for your generosity and your thoughtful input today, man.
Well, thank you for having me on. I was happy to do it. Angela Davis is like, not just like one of the most important, like in air quotes, thinkers that the United States has had for the last half century. She's also the person who provides the inspiration to make a lot of fundamental change. And the people need fundamental change. We have to. Thank you for using this discussion to like move things forward. I think like a lot of people who are part of Planet Scum, I like to use comedy to escape. But I think with the way things are moving and happening right now, we need to we don't need to laugh all the time. We can learn and help each other learn.
I'm kind of thinking about it like health food, like for so long I consumed media and just fun that filled me up in a way that's what I processed and regurgitated in my own flavor. And maybe it's unrealistic to expect myself to ingest more substantial things and then to be able to process and deliver something a little bit more relevant at times. But for me, it's worth the effort because it no longer feels satisfying or nutritious to just like take in the things that make me feel happy and then like have these ideals kind of in the back of my mind but not really actively pursuing greater knowledge or perspective on these things.
There
needs to be like a balance shift here. So I mean, ideally, I just want to read Neil real quick. If you're looking for a resource for anti-racist, anti-bias training, especially for people who work in schools, social services, check out Embracing Equity. I will do that. I'm going to open the tab right now so I can look at it after the show. Okay, but let's see. As we wind down, I think the point that I'm trying to make here is Vacation Jason, the character, is kind of like aspirational. Like, wouldn't it be great to go on vacation and be that carefree? You can't really go home again. I'm like, we just like, maybe one day I'll write a music video about mass incarceration, but I don't feel educated or like that's not appropriate. That's just, what I mean? There just needs to be more, in my opinion, more emphasis. We have the time, we have the resources, we can educate ourselves, and this is not the end game, as I discussed in that article about white people trying too hard to read and receive anti-racist book recommendations. But I got this platform, I got to do something with it.
Yeah, and Google is free, so like we can find these resources and discuss them without having to force Black people to, do the work for us.
Right. So I guess I'll end with this. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Riley Soliner, because I'm going to look through some book recommendations in my own lists, and I'll announce the next book soon in the next couple of days on Twitter and Instagram. If you're interested in helping us keep this thing going, and having a portion of your money go to the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, I got postcards, hand drawn. I'll be drawing some more next week. If you're a musician, if you're an artist, if you're a vocalist, if you're a creative performance artist, come join me next week as I draw. Help me create a cool Googy mood to draw to. And I don't know. Thank you again to Sean for being a part of the show this week.
Yeah, thank you, Riley, and thanks to Bryson and Hex for facilitating. Yeah, this was great, and actually made me feel a lot better about my day. So I appreciate it.
We're doing it. Small group of people at a time. It's starting to feel a little communal. This is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amen. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone in the chat keeping this active. And yeah, this is Googy Morning, Let's see, final recommendations, not just book ones, but there's the Angela Davis documentary that I found for free on Tubi TV, TUBITV.com. I'm going to watch that. Watch 13th, free on YouTube. Grief Walker on Vudu.com, VUDU. And you know what? I'm going to watch this today after I watch some of those other things. Eric Andre, one of my favorite comedians, has a new special on Netflix called Legalize Everything. I saw the opening sketch where he does a hidden camera prank where he plays a police officer just ripping bong hits on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. Gotta love Eric Andre. Thank you guys. Look, I had low expectations, tried to turn them into no expectations, and we ended up with something a lot better than I feared it wasn't going to work. I'm going to keep it going. I'm going to see if I can hire a facilitator so that I don't feel so like open watery paddling. But this was good. I appreciate you guys having an open mind and being here for this kind of content. Sometimes I want to be funny. Sometimes I want to speak my mind. And I feel like I'm grateful that you guys are allowing me to do both. Thank you. Have a Googy morning. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Please stay safe. And yeah, you have a mind. You have a mind. Your mind is capable of expanding a great deal. So use it. Thank you. Googy morning. Bye for now.